about 4 to 1, something like that. For every 4 bicycles, you might see a car, and sometimes it's even less cars to bikes. So it's a lovely little island. It's just off the mainland coast, and
Are we able to share our screen, Laura, or is that not a thing?
we had a 75 people meeting. Shut the door. Leave or stay.
You should be able to share. Hang on, I'll just make sure it's enabled. You should be able to share now. And it's Cumbrae, Cumbrae, is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, Cymru, and then the locals say Cymru mainly, I think.
It's traffic free. It's 14 miles or so round about, isn't it?
10 miles round, and it's not exactly traffic free. No, cars can go there, but they're discouraged, if you know what I mean. So, I think Louise is just showing everybody everything else we've been looking at this, which is mainly our. I think we'll go full screen now under view.
I just need to do.
No, just go view full screen, and then can you already see our screen? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so that's Largs.
Just let's go back to the beginning.
Oh, we're in the wrong place. Sorry about this. We thought we were organised.
Right.
So this is the view of the island of Cymru from the mainland, and in the distance you can actually, if your screen resolution is good enough, the Waverley paddle steamer cruising by, you can get a ferry from Largs, a paddle steamer, but we get the regular service ferry, which we see in the next picture.
So this is waiting for the ferry to come in. One of the things I love about this area and this island is that the view is always different depending on what the weather is, and obviously we've got the benefit of a beautiful day here. And then this, as you can see, lots and lots of people enjoying using the ferry to take their bicycles over to this island.
Just to say about the ferry, they run every 15 minutes in the summer and every half an hour in the winter, and it's heavily subsidised. So with a bike, it's like £5 return, maybe £8 return, something like that. It's not much.
And with children, which is kind of our focus, there's just lots to do, lots of rocks to stop and explore and climb on, nice views to look at, various tea rooms.
Yeah, and in the distance there is the mountain range on the Isle of Arran. So the other islands that you're looking out to are the Isle of Bute, which is what you see in the middle distance, the Arran mountain range, and you can also see down to Little Cymru, but you can also see north to different locations, including Ben Lomond, from certain points on the island. We focused in talking here, and we'll only talk for another couple of minutes, but we're focused here on talking about cycling round the island as a family on the 10 miles. At the southern end of the island is the town of the island called Rothesay, which you see in the distance.
No, it's called Millport.
Millport, sorry. Getting my names muddled up. Millport. And it's a huge bay. There's a lovely beach. Some summers you can even rent, kayaks, sit on board kayaks. There's about 15 cafes there. And if for any reason you showed up at Cymru without a bike, there's 3 different places there in the town where you can rent a bike. And you could either walk for an hour to get to the town or jump on the bus.
Yeah, we rented a tandem there because we have a friend who's visually impaired. So even though we had our own bicycles, we had me on the front and our friend on the back. So he got the bus and then we rented the bike. There's a lovely children's playground here as well, just by this massive field, which clearly is good for kite flying. And then Crocodile Rock is the famous rock in Millport and Cymru. Again, nice for smaller children, particularly to... Our children are now 10 and 12, so this is quite an old.
Yeah, we've got picture. A collection of pics here taken over the last 15 years because we go there very frequently because of a family home up there where we can go and stay. This is coming back on the circuit. We're like 2/3 of the way around the island at this point, and even a view coming up of the Waverley paddle steamer that cruises the Firth of Clyde, and so often comes past and is always a great sight to see. So you're looking back to the mainland across the water there, which is only about 1.5 miles away. So one thing that we haven't, as I said earlier, we're concentrating on cycling around the outside of the island. There is a hill on the island. It's 300 feet high or about 100 meters high, and you can cycle to the very top Then you get an even better view of the surrounding features. And there's quite a nice plunge down from the hill down to the town of Millport. But nothing's very far at all. So the hill climb, even for those of us who pedal slowly, probably only takes about 25 minutes, and coming back down is probably 10. So it's about as exciting as that. But there are all sorts of different beaches. There's often seals here and there around at the shore, and plenty of other bird life and boat traffic coming up and down, because it's one of the ways the larger boats travel into the ports at Glasgow.
And one last thing about, I know 10 miles around the island, it's, something most people probably listening to this could do in an hour, but with kids, for them to be able to say, right, I have cycled round a whole island, is a real sense of achievement, and I've done it in an afternoon or a morning. They were really, really delighted to be able to do that. So
and final thing to say about the other islands nearby is just up the coast by about 8 miles is the ferry to Weems Bay, and also down the coast at Ardros and the ferry to Arran. But yes, if you could coordinate with the Waverley paddle steamer, sometimes you can even sail from Cymru to one of those other islands, because that's how the ferry seems to go.
It looks from your photographs that it's always sunny as well. Is that right?
No. we have cycled on there and been completely drenched. Yeah. But in the summer, we find that the sun usually comes out, so even if you set off in the pouring rain, you can have dried out, in a couple of hours.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to say is we've seen lots of people doing time trials for fun of all ages, including quite young kids, belting around the island. So if 10 miles just seems like such a walk in the park, well, join in with the people who just like doing laps, because it's one of the nicest places you could possibly choose to do lap cycling anywhere in Britain, I'd have thought.
Absolutely. Oh, thanks, guys. That's lovely to hear. And I know I've read Louise and Jem, for those that don't know, have a travel blog, and I've read about this island on their blog, which is why I knew about it. So perhaps you can stick your blog in the chat for people to
we'll do that. And Joe had asked, is there camping on Cymru? And no, there isn't any. Though obviously there are different rules about wild camping, but actually a lot of the land is occupied there. It would be tricky to wild camp, I'd have thought. But all sorts of accommodation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, guys. So next up, I suspect this might be the other end of the country. Angela's got a hand up. And just to remind, if anyone who would like to make a contribution, just please pop your virtual hand up, and then I'll notice you.
Thanks, Laura. A couple of islands that Laura thought you might be interested in. I only stuck my hand up and jumped in because I need to get some wet kit off. I've just come off the water, and it's windy and lumpy out there today. So I think one of the interesting things is, like, when's an island an island? Because some islands, obviously, they're probably still islands, but, connected with causeways. So a couple I've done in the southeast have been around Sheppey and Grain, that whole part of the Thames estuary, which is really interesting, I think. Also around, I love estuaries and ferries, so around Essex and Suffolk, there's some great trips around there. I'm not as organised as Louise and got pictures. But the other one I was on recently was Anglesey. There's some really good cycling up there. The cycle network that you probably all know and use all the time, but around North Wales and then Anglesey itself. But the one Laura thought you might be interested in as well is the Isle of Wight. So I've been a couple of times on the Isle of Wight. I'm sure many of you know it. If you take a map of the Isle of Wight, it's like a cycling paradise with all the trails and everything on it. I've gone over by hovercraft just because it makes me feel like I'm in a James Bond movie, and they're really happy to just put your bike in the hole there. But of course there's ferries, and that's very easy too. One I did, which was really good, was go across on the hovercraft to get into Ryde, and there's like about 5 or 6 miles down the estuary, back roads, old railway lines, looking at the ruins of an old abbey that Henry VIII, one of his wreckers, dealt with. There's lots of flat trails as well. there's a great something called the Tennyson Trail. There's lots of references to Tennyson, and that runs from the northeast to the southwest down to Freshwater Bay. It's a lovely sort of 15-mile off-road one, and then also done a bit around the east coast as well, from Bemborough down to Shanklin and Sandown. So I'd really kind of recommend it to you. There's some good campsites as well, obviously CAFs, which is good. And then I'm signed up, and some of you might be signed up for the Ronde that runs at the end of May, that bank holiday, that long bank holiday. And the Isle of Wight Cycling Club, they have this round the island trip. And if you've got children, you can do a much shorter one, which is I think about 10 miles, or you can do the whole round the island, and it's 65 miles, and various villages open up and give you tea and well, you pay for tea and cake. Last time I did it was everyone dropped out apart from me and an 11-year-old boy, and needless to say, the 11-year-old boy led the way, and I trailed behind him. But yeah, just recommend that to you. Finally, just in Essex, there's one I did which was lovely, which is that there's two, Mersey and OC. And Mersey, I went over and I took my Enid Blyton book, Island of Adventure, and wanted to recreate that adventure feeling you have when you have when you're little, and that's really good around there, and that's by a causeway. And OC, you're not really allowed to get off. It's got, but we did, and that's again when the sand is at a certain part of the tide. And that's kind of Essex way as well. But I guess the main thing that Laura thought you might be interested in was the Isle of Wight. So I commend it to you. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Angela. You know, there's loads of people commenting saying that the Isle of Wight is superb. I did it a few years ago and remember that it was really full of traffic. And I think since then, somebody's bought me, I was there last year and someone bought me a map of cycling routes on the Isle of Wight. And I don't think we were aware of all the rail trails there are on the island and all the traffic-free routes. So I'm desperate to go back really and explore that. Yeah, I remember it being very busy when we were there on a summer weekend. Yeah, the A roads on the north side, that was probably what I remember. It was like narrow roads and trafficy, but so beautiful. And yeah, I think those traffic-free routes would be great. But those islands in Essex that you mentioned, Angela, Mersey, and what was the other one? How do you spell OC?
OC, OSEA from memory. It's got, many of these places have got really interesting history. So I think that used to have an old sanatorium on it now, and then I think some famous celebrity then bought an exclusive hotel, and you go over and you get dropped off if you're part of the celebs, invitee list. But there's lots around Essex and Suffolk, because there are around lots of bits of coastline. I mean, we are on an island of ourselves, of course, which we forget.
Absolutely. Someone's just commented to say near to OC is also Northey Island. Yeah. And you can get there with permission from the National Trust. Yeah. Fascinating. It's not a place I'd ever considered going, but that's exactly why I wanted to do this session, because I knew there'd be some things that come out the woodwork. Thanks for the contribution, Angela, much appreciated. Caroline's up next. Caroline's got a hand up.
Hi, I've just come on my phone because my laptop crashed, so it's like, yeah, I was going to show some photos, but I can't. So I went to the Isle of Lundy last August, which is in the southwest. You can get ferries to the Isle of Lundy from Bedford or Ilfracombe, and it's sort of National Trust Island, so it's completely traffic free. There's no cars allowed on it. There's also, you can't even take your bicycle on the ferry, and usually you can stay they do tickets that sort of last for 2 nights on the island and then you come back, or you can do a day trip. So there's some logistics involved with it as to what to do with your bike if you are going over to stay overnight or 2 nights because you need to leave your bike somewhere. So I was fortunate. I found some lovely people that I could stay with and leave my bike with. But one thing to be aware of as well is that the ferries don't always go and come back from the same place. So I thought I'd booked to come and go to and from Bideford, but I actually came back to Ilfracombe So there's logistics as well, that if you leave your bike somewhere, your ferry may not come back to the same port, but there is a transfer bus if that happens to get you back as well. So it's just the main problem is where to leave your bike, but the actual island of Lundy is just so beautiful because it's a nature reserve and it's got a campsite. So Lundy means puffin in Norse, it's Puffin Island. I wasn't there when the puffins were in season, but there were just so many, there was just lots of other birds and flowers, and just quiet as well because there's no traffic, obviously. The campsite's wonderful. I would warn anyone that if your tent is in any way delicate, it might get flattened. They have a room that's for a tent, called a tent graveyard, because just the wind is unreal because it's right, you know, it's on the Atlantic. So my second night there, they let me sleep in the small museum, but it was because my tent had been attacked by a seagull. So, and I had a rip in it, so it was going to get shredded in the wind. So there's lots of really, all the buildings, like the church, the museum, cottages, they've got these little extra rooms in them where you can book accommodation. You have to be quick to get those, or there's the campsite. So if you're on the campsite, it is lovely, and it's right in the little hamlet area that's on the island. But you have to be kind of quick to book those if you want them. But you can stay in the lighthouse and things like that. It's just really quirky and interesting. So I suppose if you're a nature lover, it's really lovely to go out to. And then you can also get out to there by going on the Tarka Trail cycle path out to Bideford. So the actual way to travel to Lundy is wonderful as well. So despite not being able to take the bike over to the island, you don't need it there because everything's walkable. So yeah, I'd recommend it if you're a nature lover, really, just to go somewhere. There's a few cars on the island, tractors, you know, sort of farm vehicles, but otherwise it's just a kind of really interesting place to go because there are no cars. Everyone's sort of plonked there for 2 days and then they leave again. So yeah, the Isle of Lundy is really really interesting. I went because I wanted as well to see there were comets due in August, and there's dark skies out there, obviously, but unfortunately it rained when I was there, so I didn't see any of those, but I saw them different nights when I was back on the mainland. So I think that's, yeah, the main thing is just finding someone to look after your bike or someone to put your bike, because I asked the ferry office and they've only got these small storerooms where they store all the food to go over to Lundy and back, so whether they have spaces, they weren't sure. It was really going to be ad hoc, so fortunately I managed to find people that I could leave a bike with and stay with. It really helped me out. So yeah, Lundy, that's my information on Lundy.
Thanks, Caroline. You're the only person I know. I lived in Bristol for several years, and you're the only person I know who's been to Lundy. So that's why I collared you for this one, because I wanted to hear about it. Definitely on the bucket list. Thank you. No one else has got the hand up, so I'm going to talk about Shetland for a minute or two to give you a chance to put your hand up. So please do put your hand up and make a contribution. Shetland, we were in Shetland last summer. We were planning to go to Germany, but we couldn't go because of COVID. So we ended up having 5 or 6 weeks in Scotland instead. It was the end of my maternity leave, so it was a way of just using a nice way to finish maternity leave. And we cycled up to Aberdeen from Edinburgh, but via the Trossachs and then via the Moray coast, which in itself was absolutely beautiful. And then you can get the overnight ferry from Aberdeen up to Shetland. And Shetland itself, I would say Shetland itself is a very long linear set of islands. So the obvious thing to do is to cycle from the bottom up to the top and then back again, which is great. It's beautiful. It does mean that if you do that, which is what we did, you're on the main, and that's the NCM route. You're on the main road the whole time, whereas actually off the main road there are some really beautiful areas. So you could, I think actually if we went again, we'd probably stay in one place or stay in a couple of places and then do day routes from those locations. I think we'd see more beautiful parts of the island rather than just being on the main road all the time. But there's something so satisfying about getting to the very, very top of Britain and then walking out to see Muckleflugger, the lighthouse at the very top. and seeing the puffins, and then getting to the end of the NCM route where the road runs out, and the last couple of miles, it's the last everything. It's the last checkout, the last post office, Britain's most northerly chip shop, most northerly post office, most northerly B&B, and so on. So there's a lot of good novelty value for that. And the other thing which was amazing about the islands is that the Viking heritage is just so visible. So there's replica longhouses, Viking longhouses, and a replica Viking longboat just by the side of the main road. So, and we've got 2 small children, so it was great with them because we could stop all the time and they could play on the longboat and so on. So it was a really interesting place. I was really taken with it. I think some people don't like it so much, partly because the wind is quite brutal, and perhaps because of COVID, perhaps just because it's what Shetland's like. When we were there, a lot of places were closed. So a couple of the cafes have really struggled during the pandemic and have closed down for good. So there was 3 days actually where we were just camping all the time, and we didn't find anywhere indoors apart from the campsite toilet, and that only had cold water. So there was 3 days of being in quite intense cold wind where there was no shelter at all, really, unless we were sort of sat behind a wall or in the quite grim toilets. So it was sometimes quite hard, but really, just amazing. Like, the scenery is just world class. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And then from there we came back via Orkney, and I suspect other people are going to talk about Orkney, because I know there's a couple of people on the meeting who Ian Yarrell in particular has got his hand up, and he recommended Hoy on Orkney, and it was probably my favourite ever place I've ever stayed, so I'm hoping he might tell us about Hoy. Anyway, Ian, over to you. I'll stop blathering on for now.
Right, hi Laura. Right, I've unmuted myself now. Might even get the video on as well. I was interested in what you're saying about Shetland, because I'm going to Shetland in the summer, so that'd be really good. Yeah, Orkney's fantastic. Exactly the same as Shetland with the wind. Extremely windy, but all of the islands, Hoy particularly is really wild, and Rackwick Bay, as you say, is a fantastic place to camp, with just massive cliffs dropping down on either side. But I think all of the islands around Orkney, Sanday, all the islands, I'm trying to think of the names of them now, all the islands to the north, all very accessible, lots of little ferries going across that. So yeah, the ones I was going to mention, they were further down in the Hebrides. Going across to Arran, as people said, getting to Arran is dead easy from Ardrossan. And then there's a ferry on from north of Arran across onto the Kintyre Peninsula. And then there's a little island which I went to a few years ago, which I didn't really come across before, called Gear, which is just off the Kintyre Peninsula. Tiny little island, but it's a fantastic campsite right down by the edge of the water. And yeah, it's only an overnight trip there, really. It's not very big, but that's pretty good. Then from there you can go up to Kennacraig and get the ferry across to Islay, and from Islay across to Jura, which has got to be one of the best places. It's just a single road which goes through Jura, but it's a really wild place and pretty good hill walking as well around there. The other place which I haven't been to on a bike, which I'd like to, is Rothesay, which is off from Skye. Loads of people go to Skye, but not to Rothesay. I've sailed there, but I've never actually cycled there. So I think it looks fantastic. It's pretty wild and fairly brutal climbs, as you'd expect. So yeah, so those are a few.
The Hebrides are wonderful, aren't they? I've spent quite a lot of time. Tim and I, when we got married, our honeymoon was out to Hebrides, and then a couple of years ago we did a whiskey tour of Islay. So we spent 2 or 3 days cycling around all the distilleries, which was fuzzy but brilliant.
Yeah, well, that's Jura. There's a great campsite just outside the distillery in Jura. So yeah, if you're into your whiskey, it's a good little tour.
I wasn't before that trip, but I've unfortunately got a taste for it now. But it has to be the expensive single malt. Thank you, Ian. Nice to see you, and nice to hear from you.
Yeah, cheers.
Gary's next.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the Orkney sort of side of things. There's if you go to Hoy, you can actually get the ferry across from Stromness to a place called Mones and then cycle all the way down the side of Hoy. If you've got time, you can nip across to Rackwick, which is, like the guy said, an amazing place to go to. And you get sea eagles flying over you as you're going along that bit as well. But you can go down to the south side of Hoy and then pop across and get the ferry back to the mainland and create like a loop with 2 different ferries. And another highlight I found was Rousey. It's only 13 miles. There's a road that loops the whole way around the island. And they're not traffic free, but there's hardly any traffic. I don't think we saw, well, probably spent half a day with the people from the RSPB cycling around the island. And there's virtually no traffic. There's a bit of a climb, but then you get a lovely sort of descent back down to the jetty. There's loads of archaeology, obviously, in Orkney as well. Rousey is actually known as the Egypt of the North, and it's all free to enter. There's no fees to go into any of the stuff there. And most of the other islands are cycle friendly. You can hire bikes on Sanday. North Ronaldsay, although on North Ronaldsay having a bike is probably pointless because you can walk to the other side of the island and back in half a day. But yeah, and the other thing I was just thinking about this morning was if you finished Land's End to John O'Groats, you could actually get the ferry from John O'Groats. Bicycles are free, cycle all the way up through South Ronaldsay, over the Churchill barriers, across through mainland, and then back from Stromness and get your ferry back to Scrabster and get the train home. It's just, and there's lots of, on the mainland, there's lots of roads that you will have to join some of the main roads for a little while, but they're not that busy, I found. Well, maybe they are now with tourists, but yeah, there's lots. And obviously when you're on a bike, you can stop anywhere because chances are there'll be wildlife wherever you are and you can't always stop in a car. But if you're sitting on the jetty at Sanday, there's a regular otter that comes up while you're waiting for the ferry. I've seen orca from the ferries between the main islands, and anything that's like puffins, they're accessible as well, and short-eared owls. And you can just stop by the side of the road and view these things, which you can't do in a car very easily. But yeah, I'd put a big thumbs up for Orkney personally.
It's a special place, isn't it? And when we were in Orkney over summer, it was the thing that really struck me was how visible the prehistory is. It's 5,000-year-old monuments just by the side of the road with sort of barely a signpost.
Yeah, you obviously have to pay to go to Skara Brae, but a lot of the other, and Maes Howe. But if you go out into the outer islands, there's actually, okay, they're not Skara Brae, but you can go into ancient chambered tombs. They're not locked up. There's just like a little iron gate. And on Sanday, they even leave a couple of torches by the entrance. When you go in, you pick up the torch. If you haven't got one, go in, look around, and then just leave the torch when you leave.
Absolutely. I remember the Ring of Brodgar, this Scotland's equivalent of Stonehenge, and there was nobody else there, and there was just a sheet. You don't have to pay. There was just a sheet of A4 questions called like Johnny's FAQ. No gift shop, no toilets, no cafe, nothing. It was just so low key. I love it. Stones in a field. Oh, thank you very much, Gary. So we've got Jason's next. Jason's going to talk to us about Jersey.
Hello. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so I actually live here. I feel a bit of a fraud because I'm not on Laura's poster because we are not actually in GB, but we are in the British Isles. So if you're not bothered about that, then I'm happy to tell you a bit about Jersey. So yeah, it's a bit of a different cycling destination from what you've heard about so far, in that we don't have howling gales for 9/10 of the year, and it's beautifully sunny a lot of the time. But yeah, there's a lot of good places to cycle. If I can just share my screen. Let's have a look. I haven't really prepared a lot, so I haven't got loads of photos or anything, but I did kind of have a look at, I think there's somebody talking about this website later on, Cycle Travel. But as you can see, it's dotted with these cycle paths. And what they are, they're green lanes. And so they are kind of tarmac roads, but they're particularly chosen because they're really quiet. It's a very populated island. I think it's, depending where you look, it's like the 13th most densely populated place in the world. But all of that is concentrated down the bottom here around St Helier. So once you get out of St Helier, it's really quiet. All these roads are beautifully chosen. The traffic tends to stick to 2 or 3 main roads around the island. So if you've got kids or anything like that, it's a great place to bring them to cycle because there's plenty of places you can go off-road or off the main roads. There isn't much in the way of proper off-road riding. Everywhere is kind of owned by somebody, so there aren't a lot of kind of public byways or anything like that. So if that's your bag, it's probably not the best place to come. But yeah, there's camping. There's 2 or 3 campsites. You can see there's one over here, this side of the island. There's one up here near me, up this side. And there's another one kind of this side of the island as well. It is quite an expensive place to go to compared to some places you might go and camp. But in general, you know, camping's relatively cheap compared to anything else. So if you want to come and camp, it's a good place to go. And there's 3 or 4 people that do warm showers, etc. over here as well. So if you want to try that, including me, of course, you could come and do that. In terms of like the lay of the land, it kind of slopes from north to south. So around the bottom here is all kind of nice and flat, but then it goes these cliffs around the top. So if you go from the top to bottom, you're pretty much always going downhill. If you go across the island, you're going up and down loads of beautiful wooded valleys. And that's my favorite route to get into work, is to follow this Route 3, because it's away from the traffic and it's really lovely. Connectivity is great. You can get here from ferries from Poole. It takes about 4 hours at the moment, or you can do an overnighter from Portsmouth, and you can stay on the ferry and it takes about 12 hours. So you can come from there as well. So yeah, and can of course fly if you do that. So if anybody has any questions about Jersey, then put them in the chat. But I just thought I'd give you an overview and kind of plug my beautiful island. See if anybody fancied ever coming here, or if you've been here and you've got any kind of thoughts about it, do let us know.
That sounds amazing, Jason. I'm fascinated. And how easy is it to get from Jersey to the other Channel Islands? Is Guernsey any good?
Easy, yeah. At the moment, because of kind of the pandemic, the ferry frequency has dropped right off, and it's actually fairly difficult to get from Jersey to Guernsey. But normally there's at least one a day each way. And getting across to France as well, it's a nice little stop off. If you're heading across to France, there's ferries every day, and it's only an hour to St. Malo, because we are really close to France. You know, you can see France, the nearest coast, I think 14 miles away. So you've got Normandy and Brittany really close by as well.
Thank you very much. That's given me lots of ideas. You might see me there on the warm showers request. Piers is got his hand up.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I haven't got any pictures. Just very briefly about Raasay and Orkney. And it was saying yesterday about changing of plans and things like that. Tina and I were cycling to John O'Groats, but never got there because we were rescued by someone else and said, go to Orkney. So we did. And that was just amazing, because that was the week of the Science Festival. And basically you could just book things in the Science Festival, cycle to wherever you were going, because it's only 16 miles away, wherever it was. We got a lift with our tandem from the bloke who's got the most northerly commercial tomato farm, the scenery is fantastic. The archaeology is just amazing. And briefly about Raasay, it's moderately hilly, and you think this is great. You're cycling along, and then you get to Callum's Road, which is infamous because Callum was said to have built it all by himself, or he did enlist the help of the army, and that is really steep because obviously he couldn't do a lot of engineering. Also, you've got to know your brakes are working really well, because there isn't anything to stop you falling off the side when you go around a corner and such like. But Raasay is fantastic because you've got an electric ferry that goes there. On the maps, sometimes you can see a youth hostel that is there, but it's not there. I think it's private house now, it's just full of wildlife. And when I went there, I saw everything except for a whale on my list of things I'd like to see, including a sea otter, and of course the nuclear submarines, which just patrol around there as well. So both Orkney and Raasay, fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you, Piers. Yeah, I think the youth hostel might have reopened because we stayed. That's where we stayed, right on Raasay. The one that's near, it's just near the ferry. You can camp, you can camp there and stay in the youth hostel as well. Louise.
Is that a different youth hostel? Because near the ferry, the youth hostel is on my map. Is sort of inland quite a bit and up a hill, and there's a hotel near the ferry, isn't there?
It was about 2 miles away from the ferry. Anyhow, we'll move on. It's the Louise and Jem. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, it's Jem speaking this time. It was tracking back to Arran and the usefulness of it for stepping to other places as well. Of course, as has already been mentioned, Aaron, wonderful for cycling round and it's more like 50 miles than the 10 miles we were talking about in Cymru. But stepping over the Kintyre Peninsula, I'm sorry I've forgotten the name of the person who's telling us about how that's a great stepping stone onto Islay or Gigha. One thing that I've used it for more than once is that the ferry once a week on Wednesdays from Kennaicraig not only stops at Islay but goes up to Colonsay on the way to Oban. It also comes down that way once a week on the Wednesday as well. It's a there and back ferry. And maybe not many people know of the Isle of Colonsay, but it's I think it's probably, well, it's just south of Mull, and there's stunning views in so many different directions. And a beautiful, again, very small island. So you can cycle all the way around Colonsay. I think it's 9 miles. But there's great beach walking across a tidal way to a very ancient church. It's 1600 years old and things like that. So I think that ferry connection up to Oban is a fascinating thing. If you want to then make a circuit, you can always cycle up the mainland along the Crinan Canal and on the west side of Loch Awe to Oban, so you can make a full circuit. But the island hopping options in the Inner Hebrides using that once a week ferry, if you can get yourself lined up for it, are very nice. And obviously once you're into Oban, you've got all the Outer Hebrides available by the ferries as well. So you can happily buy one of those 2-week tickets on Calmac and go all over, but include some of those inner islands as well as the outer islands. And then the other thing that I'd put in the chat is the other thing to use, Aaron, for stepping over is you can make a circuit back onto the Firth of Clyde and cycle via Tinnaburroch and back onto the Isle of Bute. A ferry comes in at the northwest tip of Bute, and then you get off Bute and you're back onto mainland Scotland at Wemyss Bay, and you can get a train straight back to Glasgow or cycle further along the NCN route into Glasgow too.
Thank you. Thanks, Jem. It's yeah, certainly a great area around there, isn't it? So I have no other hands up, so it's me again, I'm afraid. I'll talk about the Scilly Islands this time, go back down south. We've a few years ago, we were going to do Land's End John O'Groats, but that seems too boring because everyone does that. So we decided to do Scillies to Shetlands instead. But for various reasons, we started at the Scillies and had to abandon that trip in Bristol. And then over the years, connected all the dots up. So we did then Bristol to Edinburgh and then Edinburgh to Inverness. And then I did Inverness to John O'Groats, and then this last trip has been the Orkneys and the Shetlands. But the Scillies are really interesting islands. I would say, if anything, they're very easy to get to, I think, from Penzance. Very, very beautiful, nice weather, but really small. So actually for a cycling trip, it was almost frustrating because they were so small. It was kind of like you've no sooner got on your bike than you've done the lap and you're ready to go again. But it was worth a trip given how easy they are to get to. I think next time we're down in Cornwall, I'd like to go back over there and perhaps explore. I think we only went to a couple of the islands, but perhaps explore some more of the others. I don't know if anyone else has been down that way. Jem, you've popped your hand up again, should you?
No, not down there, but I was just going to mention if we haven't got to Lindisfarne yet, we could always talk about that before the end of the session.
Oh, please do talk about
But maybe somebody's got something to say about the Scillies next, so I'm jumping topic.
No, do, Jim. Talk about Lindisfarne. It's one of my favourite places.
Okay, well, I mean, one of the really nice things about Lindisfarne is, and we've done it from Berwick upon Tweed, you can be down to the causeway on the most incredibly quiet roads, and you're cycling on like grass strips of the NCN1, of the NCN1 route, to be cycling on sort of sandy grass by the sea, and then suddenly on across the causeway, tidal again, onto Lindisfarne. Great. Obviously, once you get there isn't really anything to cycle on the island, though if you've got an off-road bike, I think possibly there's 1 or 2 tracks. But the beaches, particularly at the north of the island, utterly stunning, and just to come into the bay where the sailing boats can harbour and see the castle and walk round to the abbey, all wonderful. But yeah, very fast down from Berwick. If you're cycling up through Northumberland, get off the train at Alnmouth, and depending on your pace, you could be Alnmouth to Berwick upon Tweed via Lindisfarne in 2, 3, 4. I mean, we as a family did it last summer over 10 days because we were staying in one place for 3 nights. But Lindisfarne is just vivid and transformative, I think, as an experience of the East Coast there. And one thing that we love doing is use the tide times to go on as all the day trippers are coming off and stay. They have a special phrase for it, the people on Lindisfarne, but I can't remember it this morning. But when you get, or this afternoon, you get locked onto the island when everybody else has left. And you can often get 6 hours of complete solitude on the island and not see anybody else. So worth parking the bike, walking to the beaches, and then cycling off when everybody else comes back on. We noticed in August that the car queue from the island back up to the left or right turn onto the A1 can stretch all the way back 3 miles onto the causeway, not helped by there also being a railway crossing. So cycling is definitely the best way, and you don't have to cycle down the main road very much at all.
As I say, he broke several spokes on the NCN near Lindisfarne. I think we cycled over and perhaps left it a little bit late with the tides, and our bikes ended up being really rusty because of all the salt water that got on them. But it was worth it. It was such a beautiful place. It's a lovely part of the world, Northumberland, isn't it? Great. So nobody else has a hand up. So has anybody else got any more contributions to make? I'd love to hear from some more people. But no, that might mean it's the end of the session. So thank you. Oh, go on, Gary. Gary's got his hand up.
I was just going to say Anglesey is not a bad place to cycle. You can avoid the busy main roads around the outside because there's a myriad of little country lanes. There's a cycle path that runs between Llangefni and Maltrife. That'll keep you off the roads, but there's also some really nice friendly cycle cafes down at Penmon, where Puffin Island is. It's sort of a private road down to the end, but it's okay to cycle down there. And there's another cafe at Maltrife. They really sort of welcome cyclists in. They've gone and bought themselves bike racks outside and stuff. So it's a place you can lose yourself for hundreds of miles on Anglesey, and it's just somewhere a bit different. It's easy to get to as well, because obviously it's on the main train line to Holyhead. So one of the things I never did, but I thought about doing before COVID started, was to actually cycle through Anglesey, get the ferry to Dublin, down through the, I forgot what they're called, those mountains, the hills.
Mourne Mountain in Ireland.
No, the one south of Dublin. Anyway, and get the ferry back to Wales through Fishguard and then back up and do a loop. So technically it's 3 islands, isn't it? Anglesey, the UK and Ireland, but that's maybe an option for somebody. I've forgotten, I can't remember what those hills are called, but
thank you. Okay, thanks, Gary. Thanks, Caroline Fenton's hand up.
Hi, assuming Northern Ireland counts, we've been to Rathlin Island many years ago off the north coast of Northern Ireland. I'm pretty sure the ferry went from Ballycastle. It's quite a short hop, but we took our bikes over. And the island's kind of, there's a few people live there, but there's a bird observatory sort of viewing platform at one end, and we cycled down a very bumpy track to get there and had an amazing, couple of hours watching, I think, puffins and, all the seabirds. So, you don't go and stay. Yeah.
That's some years ago, it was in the nesting season.
Yeah.
And there's the RSPB have planted there for the season to guide you to all the birds.
Yeah, so if you pointed them all out, you didn't need to know what you were looking at because she would explain what everything was. And then we bumped back along the track and back to the ferry. So it was a sort of,
it's not much cycling. Yeah. It's a good day out anyway, yeah.
And it's probably an island a lot of people don't know about.
Absolutely. I think that's on my map. The map I mentioned that I've just put in the chat, the biggest islands, I'm pretty sure it's on there, and it's certainly not one I considered.
Shaped island. Yeah, it's like it looks a bit like a boomerang.
Yeah. The other one that somebody had put in the chat was the Isle of Man. I don't know if there's anybody on the call today who's cycled on the Isle of Man. A good friend of mine rode from Leeds and then went across there and did a trip there and said it was really beautiful. I think it is quite brutally hilly. So if anyone has got experience of the Isle of Man, I'd be interested to hear it. Andrew Sykes.
Yeah, I'm not going to put my video on because I'm still in my pajamas. And I don't want to take too much time up, but I did make a couple of podcasts, one about, quite a short one about cycling on the Isle of Wight, which is episode 10, I think it is, of the Cycling Europe podcast. And then last year, if anybody's interested, I did actually make 3 podcasts about cycling the Hebridean Way. The first one was before I went, and I interviewed various people, including the guy who wrote the guidebook, for doing that. Somebody and various people who'd been up there, and then it was interesting to go there. And obviously, I made 2 follow-up podcasts, and their numbers 38 to 39. So if anybody's interested in that, then have a listen. They're quite long, but hey, you've got a few gaps between various sessions today.
You've had a vote of commendation from Angela there about your podcasts, reminding everyone how good they are, Andrew. So perhaps you could put a link in the chat so people can access them if that's possible.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks as always. Neil Ian.
Hello. I'm just thinking, while we're still got a little bit of time left, we've ticked down most of the obvious Scottish islands, but no one's talked about Mull yet, which is a really nice place to get to. So dead easy, a 1-hour ferry across from Oban into Craignure. And then if you look at the route of the Mull cyclosportive, it's about 140k, takes you around most of the roads in the island. Maybe worth taking an extension down the Rossamal, Piona, and then taking another island, which is absolutely stunning. Lots of like monastic stuff, St. Columba and all that. And a really nice car-free campsite, which we really enjoyed staying at last year. There's a Bothy as well, and a few other places you can stay. Maybe one final tip, if you're coming in from the Outer Hebrides into Mallaig, the route down through Morvern and Ardnamurchan is absolutely beautiful, like quiet single track stuff. You can get the ferry in from Kilchoan or Loch Allen across into Mull as well, which are also really nice ways to extend that.
That west coast of Scotland, it's just a playground, isn't it? There's so much to explore. I feel like I could live there and for a lifetime, and I still wouldn't have been to everything.
Yeah, it was pretty busy last summer. There was a lot of kind of cars, so maybe the height of summer it wouldn't be too much fun on sort of the main roads. I say main roads, the twin track roads. But the rest of the year, yeah, it's a playground.
Absolutely. What a beautiful place to be. I know we cycle on the Black Isle, which is only just an island, isn't it? Talking about the east coast, but I don't really know of any of the other. Are there any other islands on the east coast of Scotland to explore?
I'm a West Coast boy. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't go over that side. Yeah, the Black Isle is the only one I could think of, and that was nice, but not just doesn't compare, does it, to the glories of the Hebrides? Oh, thank you so much, everybody. It's been a really interesting session, and I'm definitely going to go away and get the map out now and start planning some adventures for the Easter holidays and for summer. That's exactly it. It's quite a selfish motivation really for me organising this session, because it was just to get some more ideas for what I could do this year. So thank you. You've all contributed to my holiday plans nicely. Thank you very much. Later on today at 3 o'clock, we've got a talk from Neil Whedon about the West Country Cycleways. He did give the talk, because some of you will probably know we have a CTF, Cycle Touring Festival Friends Network, which is like a mutual hosting network. And last year we did a monthly talk as part of that Friends Network, and Neil gave a talk on the West Country Cycleways, so Somerset and Avon, but his tech didn't work, so actually he didn't really give the talk. So anyway, he's doing that again today at 3 o'clock. So if you either missed it or you watched it and didn't really manage to hear anything, which is what I think most people's experience was, then that's at 3. And then there's also talks at 5 o'clock, and then at 8 o'clock we've got, 5 o'clock is Cycle Navigating Africa. So Blanca Fernandez, who did she came to the very first festival and then went off and has cycled an awful long way around various parts of the world, but including Africa, and that's what she's going to talk about today. And then at 8 o'clock we've got Mel Nichols, who's going to be talking about her Hand Cycle Britain challenge. So she's a para-Olympian athlete, and she's a hand cyclist. So she broke the world record for cycling around the UK on a hand cycle. She's also broke the world record for Land's End John O'Groats on a hand cycle. So she's a fairly phenomenal woman. So I'm really interested to hear what she's got to say at 8 o'clock tonight. Great. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy the next few hours. You've got a couple of hours off to go and get some lunch and go out into the rain. Thanks all for joining us. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, everyone.